Hello everyone, with this video today, start of the new year, I wanted to go over some things in Cyrodiil that are really making it an unenjoyable play experience for everybody. Not just myself, not for small scale, not for 1vx, but also for new and veteran players that enjoy the war and how it is in a large scale battle. What lag prevents is it really inhibits the ability to solo 1vx. It really makes it difficult to small scale. And as if these reasons aren't obvious enough, it makes it difficult because when you are alone and you're taking damage from multiple enemies all at once, and if you can't CC break, if you can't roll, if your abilities gray out and you can't cast them after a roll dodge, if they get delayed and stuck in a D-swing, that time spent trying to do things that shouldn't be an issue end up causing you unnecessary deaths. It's not very enjoyable at all. It's very intrusive to your gameplay experience. It really diminishes the excellent combat system that we have in ESO, and it really makes solo 1vx, small scale, even like a medium-sized group who's trying to do something, whether it's an elitist or try hard, all the way down to a casual who's going out and trying to defend a keep late at night against a group of 10, if it's still lagging or what have you then. And in Vivek, for the past couple of weeks, I'm not gonna lie, it's been lagging regardless of what time it is. It can be 3 in the morning, it can be 2 in the afternoon. There's just this awkward lag that's going right now, and it's just, you can't shake it. It just makes this enjoyment of the combat system. Overall, it's just a yucky kind of experience. Where this lag stems from, it comes from CP and the calculations that the server has to make when it comes to healing, rolling, defile, damage dealt, damage mitigated, your resources and how they're affected by Siphoner or different sets or players or abilities. You have proc sets like Earthgore, Kalurians, Viper, Slodes, Red Mountain, and all the visuals that they need to do, and then the calculations that they have to make to make sure that they reach a certain checks and balances of, is it not proccing, is it proccing, what causes it to proc, the chance to cause it to proc, like Kalurians with you having hit a crit. And then you have ground persisting siege like the scatter shot and the meat bags now, and it's 6 seconds of just staying on the ground, constantly sending and receiving information for the damage that it's causing players to be modified and take more, or how much it's doing itself, and multiple can be layered on top of each other, so then you have different calculations that are going on that. And ever since that siege change has occurred, I've personally noticed that performance has gone downhill. And then we have things like players stacking even more than they used to years ago. It's no longer they stack because it makes more sense for a large grand scale PvP, because when it comes to tactics it really doesn't. You almost want to have your faction kind of spread out more and hit multiple keeps. That way when you have well organized raids, they're able to effectively take keeps without having like 50 AD defending against one DC group. One DC organized raid of 12. You kind of want to force those AD players to spread out, but when everybody goes to one keep, it causes a disgusting lag across the server for everybody because of all the ground healing, all the ground ultimates, the mobile ultimates, siege, and once again the CP and back to the proc sets and everything else. Another thing that we've recently figured out is that guild roster, as well as friends list and your leaderboard, all affect the checks that it tries to do to see at all points of you being in Cyrodiil where people are, and it constantly updates them with the information. And ways to remove that are by searching up your own name, and that way it's only looking for the update on yourself. Or you can even just do random characters and search up nobody. And then another thing is stacking all into one campaign when we have Shore, which is a perfectly good campaign if people wanted to go overflow into it, but no one does, because scoring and loyal to your family. Dude, get in the door! Don't double door! Don't double door! Ah, double door! Action in the war is way too high, and that's not like that's an issue for roleplay sakes, and also for like team spirit. That's good, but the issue is that Shore gets left in the dirt. Satha doesn't pick up until late in the evening, and Vivek is constantly packed with players. In the evening, it can get queues up to 100 players trying to get in, instead of just going to Shore and doing something there. So when everyone's trying to go into Vivek, because that's the only place to PvP, it just makes things even worse for anyone looking to have any form of decent PvP for the amount of hours that they're on. How can lag be alleviated? Well, these are various things that I believe, I'm not an expert, but things that seem logical enough that they could help alleviate the lag. You can lower population on all the above 50 campaigns by another 20. Make Shore a 30-day campaign, and then make Shore and Viv share a scoring. So that way, players who generally just inhabit Vivek can now go to Shore when the overflow or the population is at a max in Vivek, and they can still participate in a way that they're providing for the monthly rewards and the whole war itself. Another way that they could do this is through reducing CP and the calculations necessary. You can change CP to a completely new system, potentially. Make it alter abilities or provide alternative morphs to class skills. And you can only delve into one tree per color, but it changes the way your skills work and fit up your unique playstyle. It's a good way to introduce a type of frost mage, or you know, a necromancer or things like that, because you're delving more into a tree and you want to emphasize it or have a unique twist to your own style of play. Whereas then it completely removes the calculation aspect. It's just adding different abilities or effects to your skills. Another good way would be no ground persisting siege. It's really not necessary. It was intended to break up Zergs, but it really hasn't done that. If anything, it's really strong on chokes, prevents people from pushing into keeps, which ends up making the fights last longer. And people don't push in, they sit on the outside, they siege. People on the inside, they don't push out, they siege. It really doesn't do well at anything but screwing over small groups who don't have the numbers to distribute extra healing, purges, you know, siege shield, rapids. And so when casual or less skilled players run into you know, a group of, you know, even 1 up to 10, they'll set up siege. They'll sit inside their keep, they'll set up siege. They'll even put siege out on an open field, rather than going in and using their own character abilities and trying to interact with the other players. They're just going to set up siege, and this is a toxic way of having a PvP experience. They're sitting on their siege because it's too laggy for them. They know that they can't beat the people that are out there because they're less skilled, or they don't know how to utilize their character as well. They stack more into health because they're afraid of dying, or they die too fast, and then they just set up a siege because it's the easiest thing to do when it is lagging, because it's super easy to turn to click a button and have it go without very much else going on. They're not actually PvPing, it's a mini game of trying to avoid siege, and then the other people, they're really not getting anywhere because they're probably not wiping people with just siege. Siege is meant to be an assistance to help you clear players out of an area. And it removes tactical gameplay, because normally on chokes before this ground AoE siege, when a group in organized raid tried to push in, another organized raid, or even the pugs would try and combat. So they'd come in, they'd drop their encase or their negates and try and, you know, ult bomb or kill a couple stragglers or chain them away from the group. But now people just set up siege and they try and run into the siege and they instantly die because there's 3 meat bags, 2 scatter shots, and a couple cold fires on the door choke. Which ends up in another wall needs to come down. There's more time at the keep. More players see that there are crossroads there, so they come over and they stack onto the fight. And it just prolongs the combat and the amount of calculations that the server needs to do, rather than having fights that should really not last that long, spread the players back out because people got wiped, and then go to a new area. Reduce group size to 12. Not only would this freshen up combat, but it would provide small groups the ability to somewhat control, or at least handle, the amount of players that they're fighting, because while casual players can still ball up, now they're not as they're not receiving rapids, or they're not receiving specific in-group buffs, and hopefully that makes it a little more difficult for when coordinating as a group leader. Or maybe it incentivizes groups like Kush and Packed Militia to make various groups of 12 and hit different sides of a keep, as opposed to just stacking on one side of the keep with their 50 man. Or send multiple groups out to different areas on the keep, emperoring, around the emperoring's keeps, to try and hit different locations at once. You can make home keep resources and keeps worth more scoring, and then the emperoring should only be 1 per objective, just to continue I guess the interest is for emperoring is that you're going to get emperor, and then with emperor you get stronger and you can go and hit home keeps. But if you want to deny your enemy faction scoring, you'll send parties out to take back keeps or resources, which will cause fights in different locations and draw other players off of the emperoring to different locations for things other than scrolls. Remove sedge, bleak, and nickel. That's probably not going to be a very liked idea, but you can, instead of those spawns, you can put places like Cheydinhall or Bruma type areas down in there. Like, they're just towns. They're open towns for you to run into, open walls. You can, interactive combat through houses or over bridges, and it also separates the distance that it takes. It increases the distance that it takes to get back to a fight. So for EP who's trying to hit Alswell, they can't just spawn up at Bleaks and run right back there in 30 seconds. Now they have to go from Chal to Alswell, which increases the distance, makes it take a little bit longer, and the defenders can, clean up the players and send them to a different location. Once again, to help try and distribute the players across. So if you die, you're like, okay, well, I don't really want to go there. I can port to BRK because there's crossroads outside. As opposed to, I can be back at that Alswell fight in an instant. And that's a big reason camps were changed back. Because camps, you used to be able to not have a limit. You just keep taking that camp over and over again. And a couple other ideas. You can remove proc sets like Earthgore, Coloring, and Viper's Load, Red Mountain. They're really not necessary for the game. They actually diminish player enjoyment on the receiving end, and it just makes it too... making it easier for casual players is understandable, but going about it where the sets and things are doing... the game for the player, it's not really rewarding, and they might not care that it's rewarding or not. They want to be able to compete with players who are better than them, but there are plenty of other ways to do that than giving them sets that require system checks before they fire off, and end up saving or dealing more damage than they should for the player who can't even do something on their own. These additional visuals and calculations are just hindering the performance, and they're a crutch on raw game mechanics. It takes the fun out of why this game truly shines, and the combat system and how interactive it can be. make IC its own queuable instance like Cyrodiil. Or if you want to keep it part of Cyrodiil, make it tie into the game's scoring by rewarding 1 point per district and 3 points for holding a capturable point in the center by Mollog, with potentially 2 flags in the sewers on the way to the center per alliance. This would encourage players to enter IC, reward those who are already in there and like playing in IC. So that way they can participate in smaller skirmishes while contributing to the faction goal of the overall monthly win. AoE healing should be capped to the group you are in, while single target healing works on those outside of your party. A huge thing with healing is healing springs. You'll have a raid of 12, and they're stacked in another group of 20 to 30, and they're casting healing springs the entire time they walk. Those healing springs hit everybody that's inside of it, and has to go through the CP. How much blessed? How much quick recovery? How much are you in heavy armor? What other healing bonuses do you have? What other modifiers? And then it's trying to heal every single person in there, and that when it's sometimes unnecessary, and it's also just causing unnecessary calculations and strain to the server. When those types of heals really only need to be used on your own group. Whereas if the other group, the other 20 or 30, they can use healing springs in their own group and heal themselves. It's just to lower the amount of calculations that are required. And if you're running around and you're in a 2-man, you see another guy getting banged on by 3 people, it's not like, oh, hey, I can't help you. But you're not going to heal that one person with healing springs. You're going to heal them with Honor the Dead, or Healing Ward, or, Cauterize, Cinderstorm, something smaller, something more individual targeting. And that's going to be, you're still going to be able to interact with those players and give them HOTS. And help your own faction. So it's not like, oh, you're completely prevented from doing so. It's just, it makes more sense to lower the amount of calculations that are required with healing. Another thing is no mobile ultimates. Make the mobile version of Destro ult into a unique based on staff type ultimate. The Inferno single target can lob a fireball at a single target, and it can be blocked, but it can't be dodged. And then once it does damage to the caster gets a buff on the target, and they increase their damage to the player for the 6 seconds that they're burning. Lightning can be a conal magicka DB that concusses enemies and knocks them off balance. The Frost, it can do an AoE ripple of ice on the ground, much like an IC boss, the Frost Atronach, that shoots outward. Rooting enemies, hitting and dealing damage for each ice chunk to hit the foe, but so it's not as strong and overpowered to have each successive hit be reduce the damage by 25%, so 10, 75, 50, 25. Make the Magdon ultimate Permafrost a stationary ultimate with synergy that instantly freezes all enemies inside. Sleet Storm creates a temporary ice wall that negates enemies from passing for 6 seconds. It is a lingering ice damage on the edges. Think of Nivea from League of Legends, and if you don't know what that is, I'll have the example. It would be used as a tactical strategy to cut off groups, cut them in half when they're PvPing, or to cut them off from entering an entrance, or to use it to allow your own group to get away from a larger Zerg because you cut off the escape route. Leg's just a destructive vicious and cycle. The tools that casual or less skilled players have available to them, like procs at siege and stacking with other players, because they know, or at least are unable to effectively utilize their character when it comes to combat, it ends up creating an unenjoyable leg. In turn, these players double down and set up more siege because it's the only reliable thing that they can fight with, as well as run an even larger herd. Add more HP to their build and build for tanks so that they don't die right away, because they understand that there's latency in their abilities going off. This is also a reason that players will spam roll dodge when you first run into them, because they're less sure of their own abilities going off and being able to mitigate, but they know roll dodge will work and dodge the incoming ability. It's a cancerous cycle that diminishes the potential that ESO PvP has. And while not all these things would have to be incorporated, they would at least be in the correct direction for increasing server stability. And some of them are pretty simple. Things can be, I guess, disagreed upon. Some are probably not correct for this type of game, and maybe things aren't in the, I guess, the image or what ZOS has planned for the future or what they see the game should be as. But I do know that the game has changed. It's no longer a large-scale PvP as it was advertised at its release, its launch. Because things have changed in this game. We now have a lot more CP, and CP in general, which we never had before. We now have things like proc sets. We now have different healing mechanisms like Thicket, and we have mobile ultimates. We have Earthgore. We have new sets and armor sets that require themselves to interact with other players and the system because they're making different calculations than having just raw stats, Hunding's, willpower, agility, Juliano's back in the day. This game has definitely changed, and things should be looked at in a way that can make it more stable for the future of PvP. These are things that I thought would be a good way to go about it. Let me know how you think down below. Like, subscribe, comment, and see you guys next time.
All of that content, so...
And that goes back to kind of looking at the bigger picture that, you know, we know that there's some players that are really good in PvP, and yeah, they kick ass. And then there's some people who are intimidated by it, and that's okay too, but
That's why we have Siege.
we wanted to...
Well, in the battlegrounds.